Welcome to the North Group podcast. At North Group, we are often invited into organizations to influence leadership and organizational behaviors. It is through these sustained relationships that we gain a deeper understanding of each client and the many ways they benefit their employees, their customers, and the broader community. It is impressive. Through this podcast series, we will be sharing the stories of a few of these clients and how they make our communities better. I'm your host, Gina Breslin, and I'm joined today by my friend, colleague, and our North Group founder, Roger North. Roger, today we will be sharing the story of the Houck Group. So tell me, how long have you known Gary Houck?
Oh my, that almost brings a smile to my face, Gina, and thank you for that nice introduction. Yeah, I actually got acquainted with the Houck Group and with Gary Houck, the CEO, before we founded North Group. So, of course, this is 25 years at North Group, so it's something a little bit more than 25 years of my previous profession, and just got acquainted on a business level. And then once we started the firm, then I went back to visit him, as I did many people in my network. And out of that, I think really first a friendship was born, and then second, various opportunities to serve Houck over the years have come through that, and it's been a fun journey.
Excellent. Great to hear. Gary is a second-generation owner, so tell me a little bit about the history of Houck.
Yeah, he is. Yeah, Gary's dad, Lawrence, just passed recently, and the stories about Lawrence are many, and I have great respect for Lawrence. One thing I do want to point out is that Gary is a person of honor, and we'll come back to that. Honor is very important to him, and so throughout his business life, he has honored his current family and his family of origin, including his dad as the founder. The company that Gary began to work with his dad back in the early 20s was laying block for residential house construction. So it was a small masonry contractor. Contrast that today, almost 50 years later, but nevertheless, a diversified, what we refer to as a specialty contractor with 8 or 9 different contracting specialties, depending on how you slice it, in excess of 300 employees. The risks that Gary has taken, the services that he has brought to the community, and the value he's brought to employees, it's really humbling to even be part of the story.
Absolutely, and that's significant growth. I did notice that Gary holds the CEO title, and he maybe views that title a little differently. And then he also, it's a CEO / head cheerleader. Can you tell me about that? Because I've not seen that before.
Yeah, he has different signature lines that I guess he uses under different circumstances. But the most common one is CEO and head cheerleader. And even the CEO part, he would cast differently than chief executive officer. He and the employees, I think, and those of us closely affiliated with the company would think of CEO as chief energy officer. And Gary, with apologies to the facts, Gary is over 70 years old. Now, those of you that know Gary or met him on the street, he could easily pass for, I don't know, really mid-50s, very energetic, in shape, very young looking, and very contemporary in his thinking and in the way he treats people. Just a very, very honorable person. But at the same time, he's a lot of fun to be around. And so that energy is a characteristic of this company, and it does flow out from him and flows down through the employees, and really everything that they do, it's a characteristic.
One of the things that we're here to talk about is how companies like Houck make our communities better. But I think that often begins with the beginnings of the organization. So why would you say Houck exists as an organization?
Yeah, Gary and his family have such a history of being others-centered. That's a North Group phrase, but I'm going to go ahead and apply it to the Houck family. Because I'm privileged to be longtime friends with Gary and Patty and their daughter Kara and their now deceased son Gary Jr., some of the stories I can't even remember anymore. Some of them I can't retell, and most of them are off the books, Gina. You know, there's many things that Houck does that many of our other clients do, making sure that emergency services in their community are adequately funded, and that nonprofits that align with the Houck Group mission are well funded. They do all of those things and more. But I call them off the books. The stories that I don't even know if Gary would want to repeat them, but there's numerous stories of Gary and Patty paying college tuition for employees' children that couldn't otherwise afford it, and I could go on, but the quiet example that sets, I think, characterizes the type of employees that come to work for Houck. I think it characterizes the amazing longevity of employees there, and it certainly characterizes how leadership is lived out at Houck. If that is not your bent, you're probably not going to stay there. That having been said, the top leaders in the company have longevity. Let's just put it that way.
I've had the opportunity to meet Gary on a couple of occasions, and we talked about humor and his, fun-loving personality. That comes through when you meet him. But to your point, I think if you're not paying attention, you would miss the genuine care that he has for his employees, for their customers, and the broader community. So let's talk a little bit about how we behave at Houck. What are those core values? What are those principles by which the team at Houck operates?
Yeah, that's an interesting question in the life of Houck. I've been involved as a consultant, advisor, and friend to the organization for over 20 years. And like many organizations, that there's been seasons, and not all those seasons have been easy, and that's almost axiomatic with being a contractor, and the risks associated with that, and different leadership teams that have come in and out of the company. And over the years, there was a series of core values-based words at Houck, and they were used off and on in different seasons, depending on who was providing leadership at the time, maybe more in one area of the company, less in another area. And I guess about 5 years ago, I have the privilege of serving on the advisory board of the company. We challenged each other to take this seriously again, and we looked at the values words we had, and they were okay. They were indicative of the way the company behaved, but they weren't at the core of the DNA. So we spent some time as an advisory board, and along with with Gary, obviously, and our COO, Lynn Sensenig, really just figuring it out, so to speak.
Sure, right.
And I can remember that day. It was so much fun because we all just came to 3 H words.
Okay.
And those H words are now used throughout the company. They're used in communication. They're over-communicated within and without. And they're all H words to follow the name of the company. And they're honor, humility, and humor. And those 3 words certainly describe our CEO, Gary, but they are used throughout the company, and they affect the way that we behave every day. And in that way, they are the best kind of core value.
Absolutely. They attract the right, repel the wrong.
Yes,
and
well
they really
said.
do, like you mentioned, drive behaviors. When we think about the health of an organization, the health of a company like Houck, the relationships, the morale, the communication, the level of trust, how would you describe that at Houck, and how do we connect that with the difference that they make even more broadly in the community? Like, how do you connect those dots?
Yeah, Gina, really good. Again, seasons in companies, but the last 6 years, 7 years, have been the best season in the history of Houck, and that's because of leadership, and that's because of clarity, leadership cohesiveness, leadership clarity. Gary giving his best to the company is more on the value side, the morale side, the energy side, and then our COO, Lynn Sensenig, who's been there a number of years, I think going on 7, is one of the best business, I'll call them operators I've ever seen, and he is completely in alignment with the honor, humility, and humor, and as a result, we have raised up leaders there, and I'm going to go ahead and, at the risk of embarrassing them, Austin Rhodes, Ray Glack, and Joe Seibert. and Matt Mao, who are the vice presidents of the firm, are completely aligned with that as well. And that has been a gift to the company. It's been a gift to 300 employees. It's been a gift to profitability, as an aside. Culture eats strategy for lunch, and eventually produces profitability. But I think most of all, it's been a gift to the families of the employees and to the communities and customers that Houck serves. And the last 6 years have just been by far the best season for Houck.
So when we think about Houck, what is it that sets them apart from other organizations?
Well, I think it's honor, humility, and humor. I'm
the three
repeating
H's,
myself, Gina, but leadership does make such a huge difference. Now, coming from leadership consultants, that's not an earth-shaking statement, but it is a true statement. And there's lots of leaders at Houck. There's leaders through all levels. That hasn't always been true, but we've hired more with that as an emphasis. And in Gary, a leader of leaders, in Lynn, a leader of leaders, and then down through the gentlemen that I named, Matt and Ray and Austin and Joe, we have more people with just growing interest in the types of leadership behaviors that make Houck what it is. And I really think that's what makes it special. Beyond that, I would say the commitment to people that surround the world of Houck, not just that benefit from being employed there or served by them or being shareholders, but the broader community, which just has waves out well beyond the office on Lingelstown Road in Harrisburg, well beyond the residents that employees, the towns where employees live. Any place they work, I think, gets to be a better place.
So when leaders get better, organizations get better. When organizations get better, our communities get better.
100%.
So tell me a little bit more about that. Why is our community better because of Houck Group?
Yeah, there's a myriad of reasons, Gina, but I think I'm going to focus in on one. We see so many, we inevitably see difficult things go on in the world around us. And sooner or later, as human beings, as leaders, we deal with difficult things. And the Houck family is no exception to that. So Gary and Patty's son, Gary, is no longer living. And he experienced some things in his life, his earlier life, that most of us would have not had to deal with, that had an effect on the way he lived his life. And Gary's no longer living, but in the tragedy that followed that and the impact that had on Gary and Patty and their daughter Karen, her husband Kyle, and their family, out of tragedy, great people bring value.
Yeah.
And so out of that time, Gary and Patty gave the initial funding to, and now many of us have contributed to the growth of something called the Kids Trust. It's an organization that is managed by the Greater Harrisburg Foundation, that was now called the Foundation for Enhancing Communities. But underneath that, we raise funds to reach the mission of preventing child abuse. And I'm privileged to be a trustee of that fund. And each year we have the privilege of taking grants from community-based organizations that do great work in the area of preventing child abuse. And so the mission of the Houck Group comes on, even though it was born out of tragedy. And at the same time, those of us, the business advisors and so forth that surround the Houck family, get to contribute to that. And right now, I'm feeling the impact of being part of that greater community. And I think that's probably the best. There's 100 or more examples.
Sure.
That's the most public and the most evident one.
And quite honestly, it's a little unique. Not everybody takes that step to, start an organization. And
it takes time and effort.
Correct.
And it takes people surrounding it. And frankly, it takes money. But more than that, it takes heart.
Absolutely. And a very clear connection to how our community is better because of a company, specifically Houck Group. What do you think others can learn from Houck?
When you are authentic. And that's a popular word now. But I don't know if I've met a person in my life that is more authentic than Gary. our colleague and friend Roger Garber likes to refer to as 3 a.m. friends.
Sure, correct.
And by that he means people that would, without question, get out of a warm bed, go out into a cold night, and help you without even questioning you if you would call. Gary is that person. And his family reflects that. His organization reflects that. His employees reflect that. And then the community around it benefits from that. And I think they recognize that behaving that way is just that's the way they've been called to behave. And then they happen to be engaged in business. And when you put those things together and they pursue excellence in their crafts, the different contracting areas that they're involved in, success inevitably results, but that's not the goal. That's just the byproduct.
Sure, absolutely. What an honor. Thank you for sharing the story of Houck Group. We are honored to serve Houck. They make our communities better.